Maya thought he was just another customer at a rundown food truck, until the wealthy CEO leaned closer and whispered, "Still remember me." In that single moment, the struggling girl's past collided with her present, unlocking a story of love, loss, and second chances she never saw coming. On a bustling city corner where skyscrapers towered above and neon lights painted the night, the paint on its exterior had long since faded. Its wheels creaked with age, and the sign above it leaned precariously. But to the young woman inside, it was not just a truck. It was a dream. She had inherited it after her father passed, carrying not just the burden of debt, but also the weight of a promise she had once made to herself, that she would keep the family's dream alive no matter how hard life became. She poured her heart into every dish, her tired hands moving with the rhythm of survival, her smile disguising the exhaustion that pressed heavily on her shoulders. Each night she cooked for strangers, yet in her mind, the faces of her family were never far away. A mother whose illness kept her confined to bed, a younger brother with big eyes who wanted to study, but whose school fees were always overdue, and the ghost of her father, whose dream she refused to abandon. The food truck was all she had left, and she worked tirelessly, determined to prove that even the poorest girl with the smallest truck could make something meaningful out of nothing. One evening, as the line of customers stretched longer than usual, she noticed a figure standing at the back, taller than the rest, dressed in a sharp coat that didn't quite belong to the crowd. His presence seemed out of place, but she was too busy flipping bread and stirring sauces to give it much thought. One by one, she served those in line, her hands moving automatically, until at last the stranger stepped forward. Without looking up, she asked what he would like to order, her tone polite but distant. Then she heard him speak, not with the usual detachment of a customer, but with a whisper that cut through the noise around her. "Still remember me," he said. Her hands froze, and she slowly lifted her eyes to meet his. The face before her was refined, polished by success and time, but the eyes were unmistakable. They were the eyes of a boy she had once known, a boy who had shared her struggles, her laughter, and her dreams. Memories flooded back of evenings spent under dim lights studying together, of splitting the last piece of bread when both were hungry, of whispering promises that one day they would escape poverty and build a better life. He had been her closest friend, the one person who made hardship feel lighter. His name escaped her lips like a forgotten melody. Arjun. Years ago, Arjun had vanished from her life, his family leaving suddenly in search of opportunities. She had cried that night, clutching the small notebook where they had written their dreams side by side, believing she would never see him again. And yet here he was, no longer the boy with messy hair and torn shoes, but a man radiating confidence, clearly successful, and unmistakably changed. She could hardly process it. What was a man like him doing here, at her shabby food truck, standing in the cold like everyone else? He smiled as though he could read her thoughts, and reminded her that he had missed her cooking. He joked gently about the meals she used to prepare, about the way she always dreamed bigger than the streets around them. She wanted to laugh, to let the warmth of nostalgia carry her, but the weight of her current life pressed down harder. She turned back to the grill, hiding the mixture of embarrassment and longing on her face. This food truck was not a place for reunion or romance. It was survival, nothing more. Yet Arjun kept coming back. Night after night he returned, each time with the same quiet patience. Sometimes he ordered something small, sometimes nothing at all, just standing near by as if his presence alone could speak the words he wasn't saying. He helped her when the rush was overwhelming, fixing a broken hinge, wiping down a counter, or carrying supplies when her arms were too full. At first, she resisted his presence, afraid of what it meant, afraid of opening doors to the past when her present was already too heavy. But slowly, his persistence softened the walls she had built around herself. Her brother grew to admire him, shyly thanking him when he provided schoolbooks that Maya could not afford. Her mother, upon hearing his name, smiled faintly as though she remembered the boy who used to sit on their floor, scribbling dreams in the margins of old notebooks. And Maya herself began to see that Arjun had not come back out of pity. He had come back because he remembered. Because even after years of separation, he had carried her in his heart, just as she had carried him in her memories. But the truth of who Arjun had become remained hidden until one stormy night, when the food truck's engine failed completely. Rain poured down in sheets as Maya tried desperately to restart it, her hands trembling with panic because she knew that without the truck, her fragile income would vanish. Then, through the downpour, headlights appeared. Arjun stepped out of a sleek car, his coat quickly soaked, but his expression unwavering. He held an umbrella over her and pulled her close, telling her it was time she knew the truth. He revealed that he was no longer the struggling boy from her past, but the CEO of a company he had built from scratch. Every long night of work, every obstacle he overcame, he had carried her voice with him, the voice that once told him not to give up, that he was meant for more. He had built his empire with those words echoing in his heart, and now he stood before her, not as someone unreachable, but as someone who had returned to share his success with the one person who believed in him before anyone else. Maya was stunned, her pride clashing with the reality of her struggles. She resisted, afraid of charity, afraid of losing herself in someone else's shadow. But Arjun didn't offer her pity. He offered partnership. Together, they rebuilt what her father had once started, transforming the food truck into a thriving restaurant that bore her name, her recipes, and her heart. Her mother received the care she needed, her brother continued his education, and Maya herself discovered that love and ambition could coexist. What began as a poor girl cooking out of an old truck became a journey of resilience, love, and reunion. It was not about being rescued by wealth, nor about erasing the hardships of the past, but about recognizing the bonds that survive time and distance. It was about realizing that sometimes the dreams we write down in youth return to us in unexpected ways, carried by those who never forgot. And in the glow of her bustling restaurant, with Arjun by her side and her family smiling again, Maya finally understood that her story had never been one of struggle alone. It had always been a food truck love story, one where the simplest beginnings led to the most extraordinary destinies. He stood in the corner of the busy street, his tailored coat shielding him from the chill of the evening air. Yet there was something restless in his eyes, as though he did not quite belong in glittering towers of the city that bore his name. To the world, he was Arjun Malhotra, a self-made millionaire, a CEO whose face appeared in glossy magazines and business journals, the man whose empire stretched across industries. People admired him, envied him, and some even feared him. But what they did not know was that beneath the polished exterior lived a man who carried memories of a girl who once made him believe he was worth something before anyone else did. His success had bought him everything except the warmth of that memory, and it was that longing which drew him one quiet night to a battered food truck tucked away on a corner where the neon lights faded and the air smelled of sizzling bread and grilled chicken. Inside the truck was Maya, her hair tied back, her apron worn, her face lit only by the flickering bulb overhead and the glow of the pan where she cooked tirelessly. She was serving customer after customer, her smile gentle, but her eyes betraying exhaustion, as though the world had given her little choice but to keep moving forward. He watched her from the line, his heart tightening, because no amount of boardrooms or billion-dollar contracts could erase the memory of the girl who once shared half her bread with him when both were hungry, the girl who whispered dreams to him under a broken street lamp. She hadn't noticed him yet, and for a moment he wondered if she ever would. When he finally reached the counter, she barely glanced at him, her voice polite and detached as she asked for his order. He didn't answer her question. Instead, he leaned closer, lowered his voice, and whispered words that carried the weight of years between them. "Still remember me," he said. Her hand froze midair, her eyes widened, and slowly she looked up. The shock in her face was unmistakable, and for the first time in years, Arjun felt the boy inside him resurface. The boy she once knew before the world ever gave him a title. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the crowded street, the noise of honking cars, and the chatter of customers all seemed to blur away. He smiled faintly, trying to steady his own racing heartbeat, and told her it had been a long time. She whispered his name as if afraid it might vanish on her tongue. He saw in her face the same strength he remembered, but also a fatigue that made him ache. She had not escaped the hardships of life. She had endured them, carrying burdens that should never have been hers alone. He wanted to tell her everything at once, that he had never forgotten her, that he had built his empire with her voice in his head, that the boy she encouraged had turned into a man who had been searching for her ever since. But all he managed was a quiet smile and an order she barely heard. Over the days that followed, He returned again and again. The city thought him strange, a millionaire in sharp suits, standing in line at a shabby food truck. But he didn't care. He didn't come for food, though it reminded him of home. He came for her. Each time he stood before her, he saw the walls she built around herself. Pride flickered in her eyes when he offered to help, and she pushed him away with sharp words, telling him she didn't need charity. He understood. She had always been strong, always determined to fight her battles alone. But he also knew the truth, that even the strongest souls sometimes needed someone to stand beside them. He began helping in small ways, fixing what he could around the truck, lightening her load when customers flooded in, offering words of encouragement when he saw the shadows of doubt in her expression. He saw her brother shyly approach him one day, holding the books he had quietly provided, and the gratitude in the boy's eyes reminded Arjun why he had come back. It wasn't to flaunt his success or to offer pity. It was to honor the girl who believed in him when no one else did, to give back to the person who had been his first spark of courage, yet the truth of who he was remained unspoken until the night her truck broke down in the pouring rain. She stood there, drenched, her hands trembling as she tried to revive the old machine, and he could no longer hold back. He stepped out of his car, umbrella in hand, pulled her close to shield her from the storm, and told her what he had become. He revealed the years of toil, the nights of hunger, the struggles no one else saw, and how through it all he carried her words like a compass. He told her he had become the CEO everyone admired, not because the world had faith in him, but because she once did. Every contract, every success, every towering building in his name carried the echo of her encouragement. She stood frozen, rain streaking her face, torn between disbelief and the pride she tried to conceal. To her, he was no longer just Arjun, the boy who once sat beside her scribbling dreams. He was a man who had risen far beyond anything they had imagined, and yet, in the way he looked at her, she realized he had never truly left the boy behind. For all his wealth, he stood before her vulnerable, desperate not for her admiration, but for her acceptance. It was not easy for her to accept him into her life. The gap between them seemed vast. She, with her broken food truck and endless bills. He, with his empire and tailored suits. She feared being swallowed by his world, of losing her independence, of becoming a shadow in his success. But he refused to let her retreat. He didn't try to buy her love with wealth. He invested in her dreams. Instead, he told her he didn't want to replace her struggles with luxury, but to turn her passion into something bigger. Together, they rebuilt her father's dream, transforming the food truck into a restaurant that carried her recipes, her name, and her spirit. In time, their partnership grew into something deeper, a romance not built on rescue, but on remembrance, resilience, and respect. For him, it was the fulfillment of a love that had never dimmed, a love that had fueled every step of his climb to success. For her, it was proof that sometimes life gives back what it once took away. Not to make us dependent, but to remind us that even the hardest battles can lead to unexpected victories. Their story was whispered across the city, the tale of a millionaire CEO who fell in love not with wealth or power, but with the girl who once stood beside him in poverty, and of a woman who learned that love could walk beside pride without diminishing it. The air was thick with the smell of grilled bread, sizzling meat, and onions caramelizing slowly on the pan. Maya worked tirelessly inside her battered food truck, her apron stained, her arms aching from the endless line of customers. Her little brother had gone home hours ago to finish his homework, leaving her alone to manage the late night rush. The neon sign above the truck flickered weakly. But the crowd didn't mind. They were here for the warmth of her food, and she served them with the quiet determination of someone who had no choice but to keep going. Her hair clung to her forehead from the steam rising off the stove, but her eyes stayed sharp, focused on survival, because that was the only way she knew how to live now. And then she saw him. At first, he was just another customer waiting at the back of the line, tall and straight in a tailored coat that made him stand out from the working class crowd around him. He didn't belong there, that much was obvious. She barely glanced at him and kept working, her hands moving automatically as she filled orders. But when the line thinned and he finally stepped up to the counter, she heard a voice that struck her like lightning. Low, deep, familiar. "Still remember me," he whispered. Her hands froze. Her chest tightened. Slowly, almost fearfully, she looked up, and the sight of him stole the breath from her lungs. His face was different, sharper, older, more defined, but his eyes, those eyes, were exactly the same. The boy she once knew was standing before her as a man. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She whispered his name finally, barely audible, her voice trembling. Arjun. The years between them collapsed in an instant. Memories rushed back, uninvited, two children sitting under the dim glow of a street lamp, laughing despite empty stomachs, dreaming on scraps of paper about futures neither thought possible. She remembered the way he used to protect her from bullies, the way he always made her brother laugh, the way he once swore he'd build something out of nothing. And then she remembered the pain of the night he left, his family packing in silence, disappearing without warning, leaving her with only unanswered questions and a hollow ache in her heart. Now he was back, standing in front of her, looking at her as though she was the only person in the world. "It's been a long time." "Maya," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying an edge of emotion. Her throat tightened. She tried to compose herself, tried to remember that she was just a food truck girl now, a woman who had no time for nostalgia or lost friendships. But her heart refused to listen. She turned back to the stove, pretending to be busy. "What do you want to order?" she asked, her tone clipped, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for the bread. "Whatever you recommend," he replied gently. "I trust you." The simple words pierced her. He had trusted her. Once with his secrets, his fears, his dreams. Now here he was again, saying the same thing, but in a way that carried more meaning than food. She fought the lump in her throat as she prepared his meal, feeling his gaze on her the entire time. When she finally handed him the dish, his fingers brushed against hers, lingering for a moment longer than they should have. Their eyes met again, and she saw it there, longing, regret, and something else she dared not name. The next night he returned, and the night after that. Each time he stood patiently in line, sometimes in his expensive suits, sometimes dressed casually, but always with that same quiet presence that unsettled her. He didn't come for the food, though he always ate what she served. He came for her, to see her, to speak to her, to be near her. Maya didn't know what to do. Her heart ached with the joy of seeing him again, yet it also burned with resentment. Where had he been all these years when she had struggled alone, when her father died, when her mother grew ill, when she worked herself to the bone to keep her family afloat? He wasn't there. He had vanished, leaving her to carry everything by herself. And now he returned, successful, confident, clearly wealthy, as if time hadn't broken her in ways he couldn't see. But Arjun didn't push. He simply stayed. He helped her quietly, fixing broken things in the truck when he noticed them, wiping down counters during rush hours, even making her laugh once or twice with the same mischievous smile she remembered from their childhood. Slowly, painfully, the walls she built around her heart began to crack. Then came the night it all broke open. The food truck's engine sputtered and died just as she was closing, smoke rising from under the hood. Maya's chest tightened with panic. Without the truck, she had nothing. No way to earn, no way to pay bills, no way to feed her family. She tried desperately to fix it, but her hands were clumsy with fear. Tears threatened to spill, but she bit them back, refusing to let the world see her break. And then headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek car pulled up, and out stepped Arjun. He rushed toward her, umbrella in hand, shielding her from the sudden rain that began to fall. He looked at her with eyes full of concern, not pity, and said words that made her entire body go still. Maya, you need to know who I am now. She stared at him, confused and trembling. He took a deep breath, the rain dripping down his face. I'm not just the boy you knew. I built something, Maya. I built everything I promised. I'm the CEO of my own company now. But none of it matters. None of it, because every night I worked, every time I wanted to give up, I remembered you. I remembered the girl who told me not to quit, who believed in me when no one else did. You are the reason I became who I am.